Community High School District 128 presents, Navigating the Transition to College and Mental Health. 3 panelists are seated at a table. Kelly Hartweg, District 128 Director of Special Services, is at the podium.
Good evening and welcome to District 128's panel presentation this evening on navigating the transition to college and mental health considerations. My name is Kelly Hartweg, and I serve our community as the District Director of Special Services for Community High School District 128. As we begin our event tonight, I would first like to introduce my colleagues, Liz Wiederzak and Stephanie Henricks, both of whom are transition coordinators for Vernon Hills High School and Libertyville High School, respectively. Because of their advocacy for the need to not only address many facets of post-secondary transition planning for our students, but also for their families, we're here tonight. When students enter high school, we are already thinking about where they will be and how they will get there at the age of 18, 20, and even 25. This is true for every student who enters the high school environment. The process of post-secondary transition planning drives all the decisions that are made. What do you want to be when you grow up? What will it take to become that? Where will you live? How will you afford that lifestyle? While high school is a time of experimentation with college, career, and living conceptualization, it is also the time that educational staff work collaboratively with parents and students to set that student up for the best chance for success, and when they leave us, whatever their aspirations and plans may be. In consideration of what our hopes and goals are for our students, this year, District 128 staff members collaborated with teachers, parents, students, and our community to update the mission of our district. Following months of meetings, reviewing goals and priorities, and reflective conversation, the mission of D128, it was agreed, boiled down to one very simple and important goal: daring students. District 128 develops students who are graduates and are daring. Our graduates dare to explore and discover personal journeys to meaningful post-secondary pursuits. So, what is a daring graduate, you ask? A daring graduate is one who is a dreamer and a doer, who is aware, resilient and healthy, inquisitive, nimble, and global. The District 128 graduate often finds success after high school because they've had an educational process that leads to civic-minded and successful contributors to our society and our world. District 128 has a 97% graduation rate within 6 years of earning a diploma, which includes all 4-year graduates and our students who take 5 to 6 years who have disabilities and delay accepting their diploma to access transition programming if appropriate. But astoundingly, 91% of D128 graduates enter college or a post-secondary educational program within 16 months of taking their diploma, as compared to the 69.7% reported by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in 2016. What we also know, though, is that in America today, the National Alliance on Mental Illness, or NAMI, identifies 20% of young adult Americans, or 1 in 5, as experiencing a mild, moderate, or severe mental health issue between the ages of 13 to 18 years old. 50% of all chronic mental illnesses experienced by adults begin by age 18, and 75% of all chronic mental illnesses experienced by adults begin by age 24. The fact of the matter is that we are obligated to recognize that national statistics tell us that 20% of our graduates have or may experience a mental health challenge by the time they prepare for or are in college. A study conducted by NAMI in 2012 found that 57% of college graduates, 57% of college students did not access college accommodations for their mental health needs, primarily due to a fear of stigma or their lack of awareness that they qualified for accommodations. We do not want this for our District 128 graduates. If we take this number and apply it to our student population, this means that on average, 11.4% of our graduates will likely need accommodations and supports for mental health needs in college, but won't seek them out. Because we know what statistics tell us about the incidence of mental health needs for many young adults, we believe that it is our job to arm our students and their families with information and strategies to be ready to address the major transition of leaving high school to enter the post-secondary world while considering their mental health needs. We want our students to thrive in college and beyond. In order to bring the D128 mission for all of our graduates, tonight's message is an opportunity to widen our readiness to be nimble, aware, and resilient in our daring mindset when it comes to navigating the transition to college and mental health needs, whether a student is experiencing a challenge before they enter college or once they are in it. Our panel of presenters each brings a diverse lens based on their roles and experiences in working with young adults and their families at the college age. And we hope that you walk away from the evening armed with strategies and considerations to support your young adults as they take their first steps into adulthood. Tonight, our goals are simple. First and foremost, we hope to decrease some of the stigma that comes with mental health concerns. This hidden disability is not the fault of anyone, and it shouldn't be treated thusly. The best chance that a person with a mental health concern has to be successfully functioning when they are an adult is to understand their illness, to know how to accommodate for it, and to know how to advocate for themselves. You will leave with strategies for planning how to set up a successful transition to college if your family needs to consider mental health challenges in that planning process. And you will leave with ideas of how to access mental health services on a larger campus, as well as elements of self-advocacy that a college student may independently, or even sometimes with guidance, use to access supports on and off campus. The format for our evening will consist of 3 20 to 25-minute presentations by each of our speakers, whom we'll introduce before they start their segment. Following the presentations, we will have time for questions and answers that you may have related to each speaker's area of expertise or role. I also wanted to share with you that we are videotaping the speakers and the presentation up here, but no audience members will be in the taping.
Slide with photo and bio of Brooke Ruxton, PhD.
Our first presenter tonight is Dr. Brooke Ruxton, Executive Director, Licensed Clinical Psychologist, Counseling and Consultation Services at Northern Illinois University. Brooke joined the staff of CCS as a staff psychologist in 2008 and has been in her current role since 2012. Prior to this position, she was experienced working in university counseling centers at Northwestern University, Arizona State University, and Iowa State University. Dr. Ruxton is the Chief Mental Health Officer and Chair of the Mental Health Action Planning Committee, bringing her expertise to consultation and advocacy work with faculty, staff, parents, and students. Dr. Ruxton's first passion is a helping professional, and in her role as an administrator, she continues to provide training to graduate student interns and works with students in individual counseling. Brooke's professional expertise and interests include a focus on crisis response, grief and loss, healing from trauma, providing training and developmental concerns of college students. Brooke is also the mother of 7-year-old twins, and she enjoys spending her weekends and free time with her husband, children, and extended family. Please welcome Dr. Brooke Ruxton.
Slide, Mental Health and College Transition, Brooke Ruxton, PhD, Executive Director, Counseling and Consultation Services, Northern Illinois University.
Okay. Well, good evening. As Stephanie said, my name is Brooke Ruxton, and I am the Director of Counseling and Consultation Services at Northern Illinois University. I do want to mention, because I'm here from Northern, we'll have all the Northern swag up there, but really, my focus tonight is not to recruit students to Northern, but to talk about services and resources that are available really on any college campus. Most of my experience in college student mental health is in larger public universities, other than some time I spent at Northwestern University in Evanston. But I know from my colleagues both within the state of Illinois and across the country at public universities, at private colleges, that really all of us across the country are dealing with pretty similar issues and concerns that we're seeing in college students. And while at times, really depending on size and situations, we may do things slightly differently. For the most part, the resources that are available for college students are going to be similar across any college campus. And so I just want to mention that because I know all of you aren't necessarily looking at, when you think about college, going to a large university, and that may not always be the best fit for some folks in the audience. And so just knowing that a lot of what I'll talk about, I think, really can generalize across any university setting.
Slide, overview.
Okay, so this is what I'm going to talk about. What are the mental health needs on campus? Some common challenges that students might experience as they're transitioning to college. Thinking about planning ahead for that transition. Then I'm going to really focus most of my time on those last 3 points, thinking about resources that are available on a college campus, managing that transition from a high school setting to a college setting, and also how things change when your student goes to college when it comes to privacy and information sharing.
Slide, the state of mental health on college campuses.
So some of those things that are similar for all of us working in college student mental health across the country is that we have noted in the last 5 years, really, increasing demand for the services that we have on college campuses. In some way, I think that's a really good thing. That would indicate that we have more students coming to campus who are aware of their mental health needs, who are aware of resources, who are comfortable talking about and seeking services, and probably represent some reduction in stigma. We also think when we survey college students that it does mean that we have a greater population of students who are experiencing a different kind of stress and pressure and might be experiencing some more significant mental health concerns than we've seen in the past. The most common things that we see in a university are students who are struggling with anxiety and depression, followed by concerns related to academic stress or family stress and relationship concerns, which is a really broad category, but whether that be romantic relationships or friendships. Colleges, because things have been changing in a college setting, we're more equipped than we used to be to provide services to students who are coming to college already with long-term significant mental health concerns. So people who have been receiving treatment for anxiety or depression for a long time before they ever get to college, we have greater resources in order to meet their needs. We also have a pretty strong focus on university campuses of training our faculty and staff to respond to mental health needs. So most of our faculty and staff are researchers and are academics with doctorate degrees who may not have had a lot of exposure in their own training to really teaching and how to work with students who might be struggling. And so that's a really big focus on college campuses, is making sure that not just professionals like myself who are working with students are aware of the needs of students, but that the entire campus community is aware of needs and knows how to get students connected to resources.
Slide, common challenges for students.
So some common challenges that students would face, and this is all students, whether students are coming in with a history of mental health concerns or not. When you come to college from high school, you're experiencing a number of new freedoms and responsibilities, more demanding academic requirements, but not as much academic support. Again, kind of depending on the size of a campus and the way a campus is set up. In a student's freshman year, they may have a lot of classes that are much larger than they've ever been in before, where professors aren't necessarily reminding them this assignment is due, or make sure you check your syllabus to see when we have an exam. There are professors who do that, but that can be a really big change for a lot of college students. Changing relationships. When a student transitions to college, their relationships with you are changing as a parent. Their relationships with their friends are changing. Growing apart from each other in some ways, that can be really challenging for students to navigate, especially when they're in a new environment. Financial stress can be a big part of college. Living in a residential setting, so there's a wide variety of ways in which residential living is set up, but if a student goes to live on a residential campus, live in a dorm, we call it residence halls now, but a dorm, they may be living in a pretty small space with another student who they may have never met besides, on social media the summer before they come to college. There are situations in which students can have single rooms. There are situations in which Students live in more suite style setting, but living in that kind of environment is new for most of our students who are coming to college, even just sharing a room with someone. Oftentimes also, if I'm saying that to incoming students, they say, I will have no problem in a residential living environment because I'm living with my best friend. Probably, there's some chuckles there, right? Because living with your best friend is very different than being best friends with your best friend. And oftentimes those can be the situations that are most difficult for students. Not that it's always a bad idea, but it is something for people to think about beforehand. Diversity can also be a new experience for students. So for example, at NIU, we have a lot of students who are coming from suburbs of Chicago. We have a lot of students who are coming from the city. We have a lot of students who are coming from places in rural southern Illinois. And we're bringing together students with really different backgrounds, really different life experiences, which is, in a lot of ways, what higher education is all about. We want people to learn from one another, but it can also be stressful and overwhelming and intimidating at times to be living with and spending time with people who feel really different than you. The other thing that college students overwhelmingly report that they struggle with is their general health, whether that be getting enough sleep, stress, and stress can mean a lot of things, but feeling overwhelmed, lack of nutrition or concern about nutritional options that are available, and exercise.
Slide. Plan ahead.
So if you think about this idea that I think a lot of us are going to talk about, planning ahead, thinking about a student coming to college who already has some existing mental health needs or concerns, maybe is already seeking treatment for depression or anxiety, and then is also experiencing all these new challenges and transitions. To me, that just really emphasizes the need to be thinking about how can we make this transition the most successful? How can we really make sure that the resources are in place and that the supports are there so that this can be a successful experience?
Slide. Resources and choosing a school.
Okay, so I think, Justin, you're going to talk about a lot of this stuff, right? Choosing a school for a year versus...
A little bit, yep.
Okay. So these are just some tips and things to think about when choosing a school. So keeping in touch with people who already know your student, obviously your family, but their current counselors, their current teachers, to get some input. Thinking about where is the school, would your child be or student be most successful at a larger school, at a small school, maybe starting out at community college and living at home. Thinking about housing options and really understanding what kind of living environment is available at the schools you're looking at. Services, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute, and figuring out how you're going to transition those services as well.
Slide. Approaching transitions.
So then once a decision has been made about a college, I think there are a lot of things also to think about in terms of approaching that transition. And again, trying to make it as successful as possible. So thinking about what might be the pitfalls that come up along the road and what are we going to do to address them. Thinking about how you're going to communicate with your student once they have transitioned to college, if they're moving away. What are your expectations for them? What are their expectations of you? What happens if they don't meet those expectations? What happens if they need to change a little bit? And I think being flexible is really important because we can do a lot of planning ahead of time and then life happens and it doesn't always look the way that we expected it to. A transition to college is not necessarily the time to make significant changes to a treatment plan. So I see really frequently people who maybe have struggled for a long time with depression and are feeling really good before they come to college, are really excited about this new transition, and are feeling like, things are going to go really well. And so maybe they make a decision to change the medication they're taking or to cut back on that. Even if things are going really well and we want them to continue to go really well, right before a huge transition, probably not the time to make that kind of change when a student is going to lose or be distanced from all those built-in supports that are in place.
Slide. Resources on campus. Counseling services.
There we go. Okay, so this is really what I do and what I spend my time doing. So any university that you go to, again, community college, public institution, large school, small school, private school, is going to have some type of counseling services available on campus. So I'm going to try to speak generally about those services. Usually the office is called something pretty straightforward counseling and psychological services, student counseling, counseling center, my office counseling consultation services. The staff members at a university counseling center are typically licensed mental health providers, psychologists, social workers, counselors. Sometimes I think people are concerned that they're not going to have that licensed level of professional, but that's who is staffing counseling centers. We may have trainees, so folks who are working on their doctorate degrees in psychology or on their master's degrees may come and do some work at a counseling center with supervision. Services that are provided include consultation, so a lot of communication with faculty and staff and other students when they have a concern about a student, a lot of communication with parents about, so I think my son or daughter is going through this thing, what can I do to help them, what's available in terms of resources. Responding to crisis, counseling center is typically responsible in a lot of ways or looked to by a college campus to be on that front line for responding to a crisis. And then individual therapy and group therapy. Likely most university counseling centers provide some type of emergency on-call services after hours. And again, in that planning process, it's really important to contact, if you're thinking about utilizing a counseling center, to contact them early to find out about what the services are, if there might be any limits, which I'm going to talk about in a second, and how to access them. Even if the plan as a student is transitioning to college is not to utilize the services on campus, but rather to continue with treatment providers that are at home, it's still a pretty good idea to check out what those services are on campus, because if there is a crisis or if there is a need to consult or refer, then you'll have an idea of what that setting looks like and how you might go about doing that when you're not in a crisis mode.
Slide, resources on campus, counseling resources.
So here's some of the what can be limitations. A lot of college counseling centers don't provide long-term therapy to students. Because we have such a high demand for our services and oftentimes limited resources, we have to make some decisions about how students use our services. And so that's something to consider when you're looking. It still may be a good idea to transition from a therapist at home to a therapist on campus if there's a reason that it seems like that would be a more short term, maybe a semester, maybe a year kind of thing. But that's something that you would have to decide on your own kind of before going. Much smaller schools sometimes may have less limits on those kinds of sessions and things like that. So again, it's something to find out beforehand. Another challenge that we face in university counseling centers can be wait lists or waiting times. So counseling centers are really good about doing some upfront assessment, but it may be that after that assessment, just like accessing a new doctor or a new psychiatrist in the real world, it may be that after that first assessment, there's some waiting time. So I also encourage people to really come in early. I said using the counseling center as a local resource. Another significant challenge, and I'm sure that if you have been involved in mental health treatment in any way, is psychiatric services. So a survey of university counseling center directors reports that 64% say they do have some kind of psychiatric services, but only 29% of counseling center directors report that the services are sufficient. So psychiatrists can be hard to find anywhere, can be really long wait times, and the same is true on a college campus. Oftentimes when we're working with students who may already have a psychiatrist at home, we're trying to help them figure out how can we help you continue that connection that you already have. How can we help you get appointments maybe on the weekend or over the phone, things like that. Because oftentimes it's just much easier than trying to transition that to a university setting.
Slide, disability resource services.
Okay, so outside of counseling services, another service area to be really aware of is disability resources. So this looks a little bit different if you have an IEP in high school when you transition to a college campus. Again, contacting these offices early to find out how disability resource services would interact with your student and any kind of documentation that they may need. One of the big changes is that when a student comes to college, the responsibility to disclose or choose not to disclose their disability falls on the student. And it falls on the student, not the parent. So even if the parent is contacting the disability resource service office They can certainly get information about how it works. They can certainly provide information, but really for a student to use those services, that student needs to be able to come and initiate them on their own or with a parent. The accommodations may look a little bit different in college, particularly because if you're transitioning to a living environment in college, those accommodations may include things like accommodations within housing, accommodations, again, for maybe the type of room that is going to be the best suited for a student, whether that be a single room or a room on a particular floor. So things that go kind of beyond the academic environment would be available in a college setting. And again, finding out about those early.
Slide, additional resources.
Other things just to be aware of and have in your toolkit. Residence hall staff have a lot of interaction with our students and are really aware of what's going on for people and have a fair amount of training to respond to mental health concerns. Academic advising, tutoring services, what kind of security is available on campus, health services, obviously, student activities, thinking about all the different ways to encourage your student to get connected on a college campus, clubs and organizations that often go well beyond what's available in high school. And then also potentially community resources.
Slide, managing the transition.
I'm talking really fast, so I just want to make sure I get through. Okay, so that's kind of a summary of resources that might be available on a college campus. When I think about managing the transition, I think about the Subaru commercials, you know, with the little girl or little boy driving the car, getting the keys to the car. I think about my own kids. So I have twins who are 7 and in 2nd grade now. And I think as parents, what we do pretty much from the time our kids are first learning to walk is figure out a balance between encouraging their independence and taking care of them. And we do our best to kind of allow them to have some independence, but then we always want them to come home and have a safety net, right? And I feel like my kids are in a much different place right now, but I feel like that's something that as parents we're doing from the time they're born. And we have to figure out what's right for our own families. So again, my kids, we live on a circle that's about a half a mile around. And when my kids first learned to ride their bikes, and they both learned like at the exact same time, there's a lot of other little kids their age in our neighborhood. So my kids wanted to be able to ride all the way around the circle, which makes sense, but was really scary for me, right? Because there's that period of time where I'm not going to see them. And so at first I was really reluctant to let them do that. And then over time, we kind of grew to that and setting regulations about when do they have to check in and how long can they be kind of out playing on their own before they come back to me. And I look around our neighborhood and I see kids the same age, and some kids whose parents I think do what my parents did and let them out and play, and they check in when they check in and it's all fine. And some parents, my kids have a little friend who lives a few houses down, and she has about a 3-house radius that she can go between. And sometimes it makes me a little sad because I see her kind of standing at the edge of a driveway and all the other kids are playing and she knows where she can go and where she can't. But I think about that and my own kids saying, well, so-and-so can stay out or can go over here and I can't. And we talk about, well, this is what works for our family. The same is true in college, right? This is just a bigger transition with a lot more freedom and a lot more responsibility. And it's a time where we're really starting to encourage them more to do some of those things on their own that we might have held their hand for before.
Slide, privacy and information sharing.
And some of that has to do with some legal issues that come up when a student turns 18. So FERPA, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, protects students from disclosure of personal information, and it actually applies to students from kindergarten age through college. This has to do with how students' records are communicated, how they're stored. As your student becomes an adult, that access that you have had along the way to your student's information no longer belongs to you, it belongs to your student. That means in any college setting, because this is federal law, that means not only grades, it means bills. It means any kind of information about times that they have maybe gotten in a little bit of trouble or had some kind of issue come up. And so it's really important, again, in that planning process to talk to your student about how that's going to be communicated. Most university systems, so students now have their online grading system that they can access, allows students the option to share certain information with students. And so that can be something that you're having a conversation about. A student might say, well, you can see the bills, but I'm gonna hold on to the grades. And you as a parent can obviously have that conversation about what's gonna work best for your family. It also means that it's really important to be mindful of emergency contacts that are available and thinking about how and when a university might contact you.
Slide. You are still the expert on your student.
For the most part, the university can't share information with you. So those are those general things that are available online. But if you call, for example, housing and say, I'm concerned about my student, I'm not sure how well they're doing with their roommate, can you tell me more about what's happening for them? They can't share that information with you by law. They can hear a lot of information, and that's really helpful to us on a college campus because you are the expert on your student, but they can't share that information with you. We get really good about talking about hypothetical kinds of situations, talking about, if a student were to be in the kind of situation you're describing, here's some of the ways that we might support them. And when you're sharing information with us on the university campus, it's not falling on deaf ears. We are taking action on it, but we can't necessarily share that information back. And that can be challenging for a lot of parents for obvious reasons. We also typically will encourage parents, just like with accessing any kind of resources, if their student is having a problem, to encourage the student and talk with the student about how to solve that problem, about how to have a conversation with their director of housing themselves or have a conversation with their academic advisor themselves. And we can coach you through that and talk to you about that, but that's going to be what we encourage you to do. When it comes to mental health services on college campuses, our laws that restrict our records relate to HIPAA, and so it's actually more restrictive, so in terms of what we can and can't share. Again, just like in any other mental health setting, we can sign releases of information to communicate and things like that and are open to doing that, but our confidentiality is protected by some more significant laws.
Slide. Disclosure of mental health.
The other law I just want to mention that is unique to Illinois is the Illinois, it's a long one, Student Optional Disclosure of Private Mental Health. So universities in the state of Illinois are required to provide students with the opportunity to identify a mental health emergency contact. There are actually 3 emergency contacts that students can identify in Illinois. One is a mental health emergency contact, one is a missing person emergency contact, and one is your regular old run-of-the-mill emergency contact. Those are things that students will choose themselves. So again, having a conversation about who makes the most sense to be those people. So there's legal terminology here. If a qualified examiner, which really means a mental health or medical professional, determines that a student poses a danger to themselves or others, in the event that a student has identified a mental health contact, the university is then required to notify that person. So typically this is cases where we're talking about hospitalization. And so again, just something to keep in mind as you approach that transition. We don't want to think about the worst case scenario of things happening, but at the same time, it's important to kind of know what's available to you and what your rights are. Okay, so that was a whirlwind. And I think I then will turn it over to you to introduce our next speaker.
Liz Wiepertsack, VHHS Transition Coordinator. Slide. Picture and bio of Jason Wynkoop, LCSW.
Thanks, Brooke. Our next speaker is, I'd like to introduce, is Jason Wynkoop. He's the Executive Director, Licensed Clinical Social Worker at Edge Learning and Wellness Collegiate Community. Jason is particularly adept in working with college students who struggle with anxiety, depression, substance abuse, and relationship skills. He has extensive knowledge and experience in wilderness therapy, clinical supervision, and working with adolescents and young adults and their families. Jason is a graduate of Valparaiso University and the University of Chicago, and is a licensed clinical social worker in the state of Illinois. So we welcome Jason.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks you to the committee that created this evening. This is a fantastic opportunity, I think, for all of us, because it is an opportunity for you to think about ways to have success in college without necessarily ever coming to my program, which is a fantastic program. It's been around for 6.5 years, but really we work with students who oftentimes have had an adverse experience in college. They went away to school, hopes and dreams were good, they started off maybe well enough, and then they struggled in a profound way. And so now they're working through their challenges and trying to get back into school and really practice these skills and habits that are going to carry them through to college success. So I want to get a little estimate here about where we're at in the audience here. So I know we've got some professionals in the room. You guys get to be lazy for a minute. I'm going to ask all the students and parents to raise your hands. Okay, this requires some direction following, so listen closely. If you are a student or a parent of a student, keep your hand up, keep your hands up. All right, everybody. And you have completed the 10th grade, or your students completed the 10th grade, keep your hand up. Okay? If you or your student has completed the 11th grade, keep your hand up. Okay? Seniors, we should have their hands up only. Okay? So we have people in here who are in 9th or 10th grade, yes? Okay? All right, go ahead and put your hands down. That's a good sprinkling there. Now I have an understanding of what we're doing here. We're really working on planning in advance. And I know that Dr. Ruxton talked about some of these things. So some of them I'll go into some more depth, and some of those I think she covered very well, and I won't need to bother. So the first thing is prepare yourself.
Slide. Prepare thyself.
So who's heard of the term resilience? I think a lot of us have. It's kind of in the common vernacular these days, right? We're trying to bounce back from things. We're trying to persevere through struggles or difficulties. And there are some things that we can do in advance to get ready for the struggles that are to come. I think Dr. Ruxton talked quite articulately about some of the challenges that you're going to face, a lot of novelty, new environments, new challenges. In advance of this, though, we need some skills. And none of these things are surprising to people. So I know Dr. Fry is going to talk about some self-advocacy. That's really important because, as Dr. Ruxton mentioned, when you go to college, students, you know, all those times when you were younger and you're like, I can't wait to be an adult. Well, when you get to college, you're going to be treated like an adult. You're going to look over your shoulder and wonder if your mom or dad can answer the question, and they're not going to be there. And for the first time, maybe, you'll be saying, gosh, I wish they were here. But if you're prepared in advance, you'll be able to do that advocacy piece. Communicating with other people, planning and preparing all these homework assignments. There are caring faculty at most schools, but they also have a lot of students. And they're counting on you as somebody who qualified to be admitted to that school to show up with the academic skills and other skills necessary to be successful. Now, I could go on all day. That's a different talk about how great we are as a society getting people into college and how not great we are getting them through college. That's a different night. You all are going to make it because you're here tonight and you're planning in advance. So we want you to have a growth orientation. We want you to think about, okay, when I show up, am I realistically going to have everything I need to be successful? Nope, you're not. That's okay. Just have the mindset that, in fact, you will get better at things. And the key thing, if you walk away with nothing else tonight, I'm going to ask you to repeat this, okay? Engagement. Say it with me now on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Engagement. If you find yourself doing college in your dorm room, you're not doing it right. College happens outside of your dorm room. So if right now you have the habit of coming home from school and sitting in your bedroom, and that's it, you may want to reconsider whether you're ready to go to school next year or not. This is the big preparing yourself and knowing your self-assessment. I think Dr. Fry might have some comments about that as well, in terms of thinking about what skills you need and whether you're ready to go and do these things. It's good to have hope, as long as it's based with some facts about your abilities to be successful. College will be harder than high school in a number of ways. And so we have to think about the ways we're struggling now, and it doesn't mean we won't be successful in college. It just means we need to plan and think differently. There are lots of resources in schools, so it's important to have high hopes and realistic expectations about who you are as a student. I will tell you, I need to stretch my legs a little bit. Okay, that moves. I will tell you that the most difficult thing for me is when I have families who present for our program and they talk about how a number of people, school personnel, the parents, the students themselves, really, really, really wanted things to work out at school and hoped they would, but they all had a fear, sometimes spoken, sometimes not, that one thing or another was going to pop up and get in the way. But they didn't want to slow down this college process. Everybody else is going to school. Everybody else is excited. I'm excited. I bought the sweatshirt. I've got the hat. I know who my roommate's going to be. I got to go to college right now this fall. And they send them away, and then in November, after Thanksgiving, when the student comes home, I get a call. We really hoped it would work out, and it just hasn't, and now we need to come up with another plan. My hope is that you can do all this planning in advance and that we don't have to be in that situation. Because that is not just a semester that's gone. This whole high hopes and realistic expectation thing really comes into play. So we really want to talk for a minute about the importance of thinking about using support. So many college students are like, I'm an adult now, maybe I want to change my medication. I don't really need to do this therapy thing anymore. Nobody else is using these supports at school. So here's some things that I think are important to think about as you look at preparing for this transition.
Slide, myth versus fact.
How many people out there think, well, I'm going to get this fresh start at college and I'm going to be like everybody else? Well, first of all, there is no like everybody else. Everybody does college differently. The fact is that, as Dr. Ruxton mentioned, a vast majority of students are going to struggle with mental health needs or emotional health needs while they're away at school. You are not alone with this if you're having those problems. And in fact, you are actually wiser if you've had them already. You're a little more prepared than students who are going to show up, never had a bad day in their life, and the third day of school they're struggling with something. Accommodations is the word that we use for all those support services, extra support services and opportunities that schools, by law, have to allow for people to level the playing field. This is not about giving you some advantage. This is not cheating. This is not bending the rules or using a loophole. It is about creating an opportunity for you to be successful. I would hope that everybody would want that. That's why we're going. The fact is, many diagnoses qualify you for accommodations, even if you did not have an IEP in high school, even though I'm assuming a good number of people have, because this district is a fine district and they're going to advocate for students, they're going to give you every support you're going to have or have access to. When you go to college, as Dr. Ruxton said, you have to say, I'd like an accommodation. And these accommodations are fantastic. So colleges and universities can provide you with a note taker if you struggle with that. They can provide you with extra tutoring support. They can provide you with lecture notes in advance. They can provide you with private test-taking opportunities, extended time, all sorts of things. And oftentimes, you've already got the documentation that you need. It doesn't require anything new or special. It just requires you showing up and saying, I need this stuff. We already talked about that a little bit. Raise your hand if you like to do things the hard way every time. You're welcome to. You're going to learn a lot. It's fantastic. My encouragement to you is that a lot of this stuff is hard enough. When you take an 8 o'clock Spanish class and you take physics for engineering your first semester, when you have, or calculus for engineering your first semester, when you have no desire to be an engineer and you know that getting out of bed in the morning is difficult, you've just made your life harder. Okay? Don't do that. Use the supports that are there for you so you can have success. Don't try to do something heroic. Getting your degree is heroic enough. Let's do that.
Slide, transition plan.
All right. Dr. Ruxton alluded to this. Don't break stuff that's already working. Dance with who brung you. practice like you're going to play. Let's do this stuff that's working. Let's keep doing it. Don't give up. Do the right things, the things you know work already. When you go to college, I would want you as a student who's going to be treated like an adult at the university to be responsible for more of your self-care and management than you are now. All these little things like who orders your medication, who organizes your medication if you're taking it, who reminds you about your appointments, who wakes you up in the morning. Because if you expect your roommate to act like your mother's been acting, do not do that, okay? I would like you, when you go to college, not to take care of anybody but yourself either, right? So college students should be appropriately selfish. We've got to focus on our own needs first, and then the circle goes out from there. These are things that need to be in place. Dr. Ruxton spoke about those, Dr. Fry will as well. This piece is critical, and I'm going to spend a couple minutes on this because I think it's really valuable. Students, I'm going to give you a few bullet points about things, and they'll come up on subsequent slides, and we'll kind of click through them at that point, but I really need you to focus on this stuff. Sleep, like in the time that we've been here tonight, there's probably a new study that's been done on sleep. In the last 10 years, there's been so much research on sleep, I can't keep track of it all. Much of it makes it into the popular press. So you can read about it in newspapers or magazines. Ariana Huffington has written a book about the beauty of sleep and how important it's been in her life, and so professionally, and how she did it wrong for like 30 years by not sleeping, right? If you're not sleeping 8 hours a night when you go off to college, you're doing it wrong. I know that sounds judgmental, but my job is to sit here and try to give you some helpful advice, okay? I hear it all. Oh, I work better at night. Oh, yeah, if I take my ADHD meds at 3 o'clock, that helps me to study then, into the evening. And, then it's hard to get to sleep, so I'll just take late classes. It'll be fine. Here's a challenge for you. If you can, after we're done, quick get on Google, or actually you can email me later, or you can email Liz and she'll pass it on to me. Find the history of the successful nocturnal society in human history. We're not wired to be up all night. We've got to get up in the morning with the sun and work during the day. So this is a lifestyle thing. Exercise, nutrition, people talk about the freshman 15. Don't worry about all that stuff. Focus on what works for you in a health and wellness perspective. To have good emotional management, to have good mood management for all of our folks in the room who are struggling with mood, you need to get this stuff together, right? Dr. Fry will talk about these tenets to some degree, but I would say that the gold standard treatment for mood disorders is positive engagement with the world, medication, and therapy. It's also sleep and wellness and self-care. So we have to stay on top of that stuff. As Dr. Ruxton said, we're not making any changes in the month before we go to school. Make them now. Evaluate them over time. See how they're working. We will have new challenges that arise. There's going to be a lot of pressure. You're going to feel pressure. You want to be successful. There's going to be peer pressure. There's going to be pressure from parents. But mostly it's going to be internal.
Slide. Adapt as necessary.
Everything's going to feel new. It's super exciting. For some of us, it's a little scary. For parents, it's totally scary. But it's exciting to have new things. We have to have a plan, though, because the new things for you are experiences. They're not brand new to civilization. We're aware of what the challenges are. You're going to be living on your own. You're going to be living with a peer community of people that are, in many cases, certainly no wiser than you. So you're going to be looking around like, who's helping me here? Well, maybe you're RA, but I'll question how wise they are, having been one. Expectations, your expectations and others. We have to be realistic about what it's going to be like. There is not proactive support in college. What do I mean by that? People aren't out looking for you to see if you need help. Okay? You might look lost and somebody might say, can I direct you and point you to the right building? But if you don't show up for class, your professor is not calling you. They're not calling your parent. It's reactive support. And when I say support, I mean it's accountability. It's you're going to lose your scholarship if your GPA dips below this. It's going to be you can't come back next semester, all right? So you have to be able to create your own support and structure, or you go to the Center for Students with Disabilities, under whatever name it is at your college, in advance. And you say, how can you help me with this? And they will. Here's the neat thing. Everybody's incentives are aligned. What I mean by that is we're all on the same team. If you get admitted to a college or university, guess what? They want you to be successful and be happy and graduate and get a great job and become a donor. They also track these funny things called retention rates, right? And colleges want to have a high retention rate, not a low retention rate, right? I want you to choose a school that cares about you, not one where you're just happy to go there because of the name on the sweatshirt. You got to pick one that works for you and has the right support structure. Substance use, have a plan for this, have a plan to say no. Get educated about what using substances might do with your medication. There will be offers for it. It might look attractive. My advice to everybody in this room is don't experiment with any substance use, even if you have already, during your freshman year in college. Is that realistic? Yes, it's absolutely realistic. It's your choice. I want you to be successful. You have your whole life to experiment with stuff, not freshman year. Trauma, I just want to briefly say that going to college, you're going to be exposed to people who have experienced trauma. They will be your roommates. They will be in a fraternity with you. They'll be in your classes. Stuff will come up, and you might feel hurt or upset or get triggered by those things. So just know that you're in a diverse environment, like Dr. Ruxton said.
Slide, transition implementation.
I'm going to kind of click through these things. You can take a look or take a picture. This is kind of a general time frame, a plan to lay out. Dr. Fry will talk about some of these things as well. I'll leave that up there for a minute or two. I think all this stuff is really important in terms of having a plan in advance and figuring out who the practitioners are. If you can work with your psychiatrist at home, that's fine. I went to college an hour away from my home. I went home once a month, not to see my mother, but to get my hair cut. Psychiatry is hard to find. If you find somebody who's your psychiatrist who gets you and who's done a good job with you and your family, you might want to consider making a trip home to see them occasionally and keep working with them. Therapist is different. There's a nice movement out there, I think, for people to try to keep their therapists and do some of this teletherapy and stuff. I'm a big fan of like being able to sit down and look at you as a therapist and pass the eye test. And yeah, you can clean it up for an hour every week, but you're not probably going to clean it up for the same hour every week. So you're going to start showing up sometimes maybe not looking so great if you're not doing so great. And I'll be able to have a release of information to talk to your family, and we'll problem solve.
Slide, campus resources to explore.
All these great support services on campus Dr. Ruxton talked about.
Slide, establish habits and patterns.
Do this stuff now. We talked about this already. Do this stuff now. Have a plan. Practice the plan. Have habits.
Slide, daily living and communicado in habits.
And I'm going to let Dr. Fry talk about these things here in terms of communication, because this is essential. Your family is your team. They want you to be successful. You need them. Continue with their support. You'll be a better adult for it, and you'll be happier and more successful. And we're about making things easy, not hard.
Slide, 1 month prior to enrollment, engage new resources.
She took care of the FERPA, which is just as obnoxious as that word sounds. You can sign a release so your parents can be in on your educational experience, and I strongly encourage it. Parents, my daughter is in the audience tonight. She's not going to get her college paid for if she's not going to consent to her parents peering into her academic world. Hi, Claire.
Slide, first week.
This is all stuff you can do leading right up to and through the first couple of weeks of school. It's important. As a parent, don't settle. Students, play nice. Your parents are trying to help you. Communicate with them. Okay, I have one more thing for you to repeat after me tonight. You ready? Anxious parents behave badly. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Anxious parents behave badly. When people are anxious, they get over-involved. They micromanage. They freak out. They show up unannounced at your dorm room. You don't want that. You have to communicate openly and honestly with your parents as you go. Anxious parents benefit from information. If you are hiding things, they will find out, and they will come find you.
Slide, third week.
We got to check, make sure it's all working.
Slide, resources.
Here are some resources. Students, please do check out this Dear Penn freshman page. I don't know if anybody else is familiar with that. It's a fantastic resource. Basically, at Penn, they had upperclassmen write letters about what they wish they had known as an incoming student and what they've learned through experience. You shouldn't want to have every experience. You want to have the best ones. So if you can learn from somebody else's adverse experience, let's do that. Read those things. It doesn't apply to Penn. Some of them are Penn specific, but the vast majority say, you know, this is college. Like, get real and get right about the expectations. Thank you guys very much for your time, and you're doing the right thing by showing up early. You're ahead. Nice work.
And our final presenter tonight is Dr. Michael Fry, founder, clinical neuropsychologist, comprehensive psychological services. Michael Fry attended graduate school at DePaul University and completed his pre-doctoral internship and postdoctoral fellowship at Rush Presbyterian St. Luke's Medical Center, Chicago, Illinois. Dr. Fry has participated in a number of different mental health settings. He has been the clinical coordinator of 2 child psychiatry units, one at Hart Grove Hospital and the other at Lutheran General Hospital, Park Ridge, Illinois. His area of specialty include various neurobehavioral disorders, including attention deficit hyperactive disorder, learning disability, autism spectrum disorder, Tourette's syndrome, and behavior and emotional regulation. He provides neuropsychological assessment, diagnostic assessment, school consultation, individual and family therapy, and parent consultation services. Welcome, Dr. Fry.
Well, good evening, everybody. You know, it's a pleasure to follow 2 people that have provided you a great amount of information. I'll have a little bit different perspective because of the work I do. I often work with kids and their families as they prepare to go to college because I've worked with them since a young age. And so for me, many of the families that I work with, I'm as invested in their student child going off to school as the next step of their life as they are, because I've known them for a long time. And so I'm excited about that. And what I'll try to do tonight is to give you an idea about some things that I found to be really important. I'll try to tell you some stories of things that have gone well and things that sometimes have not, and then you can learn a lot, you know, with regards to that. The first thing is to embrace the opportunity. You know, so for those of you who are the parents in the room tonight, to really be excited about the fact that now your son or daughter is at the spot where they're going to take the next step. And it really is, if you think about it, you have been trying to work yourself out of a job since day 2 of your child's life. And so this is a time to really be excited. Be excited about what's next and things like that. For the student, for you guys, as you're thinking about that, you can be excited about all the possibilities of what you're going to do and how you're going to do it. And so you're hopefully going to get a certain degree of freedom that you may have wanted for a long, long time, allow you to experience things and go places that you've been thinking about and talking about with your friends, looking online, whatever that is. So it really is a great time to take a chance to sort of be excited about what's going on. The second thing that I think is really important, and I was glad when Dr. Wynkoop asked you to raise your hands, that there's a number of you here tonight that are still in 9th grade or 10th grade, 11th grade, and not seniors, because really it allows you to do some planning and some thinking about what goes on. And one of the things, by the nature of the work that I do and the kiddos that I work with, you know, there's been a long time in the education system in the United States of America that people just focus on what 4-year university am I going to? And now there's starting to be some flexibility to say, well, maybe a 4-year university isn't the best thing. Maybe it's a community college. Maybe it's a certificate program. Maybe it's a technical school. Maybe it's a gap year. One of the things I would encourage you to think about is what's best for you as the student, what's best for you as a family in terms of what makes sense. I was with the family this evening. I've worked with the 3 kids in their family. One of the kids went to a 4-year university, is now a teacher, a successful teacher. The second one is now a sophomore at a local college, and he's getting a degree in business. But their third child is pretty convinced that, you know, he's not very good at English, and he finds it really hard to write papers, and he's thinking that maybe instead of going to college, he wants to go to a technical school. And he's done research about this great school that Apple has in California. And so this school will not require David to take more English, will not require another humanities course, another fine arts course. It will allow him to use his God-given abilities and excitement and talents with regards to doing the things that Apple does. And he's selling his mom on the idea that, yes, he can go to California, and that's really what he wants to do. And quite honestly, I think that would be a good fit for this young man. So think about the idea that there's opportunities to do things differently than just the traditional of what people have done, and the goodness of fit between who you are as a student and what you want to accomplish. There's an increasing number of different programs to think about to take advantage of. So give yourself the flexibility to do that. The next thing, it will allow you as a parent and a child to redefine the relationship. And this will be an important dance that the two of you go through in terms of the relationship between how can I let go of my child and shift the responsibility to them in a way that they're ready to have it. Now, the other thing I'd encourage you to remember is that this has to be a collaborative relationship between you and your child. You don't want to just pretend that we've had a really rough go of it for 4 years, and we're just really kind of tired of trying to slog this thing out. So I think we'll just say, you go ahead away to college, and we'll hope it's going to be okay. And I could tell you a lot of stories of families who have done that because they just hope that a new thing, something different that can take place, and now it's going to be okay. But usually that's not the way it happens. Usually is the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So you want to have an ongoing and honest conversation between parent and child about where things are at, okay? And it has to be grounded in sort of what's going on now. So for example, one of the populations that I work a lot with is kids with ADHD, okay? And the idea that your son with ADHD has never got up for school on time, you've already been, nagging him and kicking him out of bed or whatever. He's never turned in an assignment on time, that you're constantly on whatever, my grade book or whatever it is, and encouraging him to turn in his homework on time, things like that. And that's been consistent, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior year, that he's going to go away to a college, and now when the alarm rings, he's going to get out of bed and go to class. He's going to turn in his papers, he's going to go to class, et cetera, is not really high. And so I would encourage you to say, this is really, I need to see a little bit what's going on. And Dr. Wynkoop said it before, and I think that's a great thing, is that I would very much agree that your kids, for you to take the risk to sort of say, I'm going to spend $40,000 next year on your education, but I really have no evidence that you're going to succeed, doesn't make a lot of sense. And the reason I say that is what I've seen happen when you knew it didn't make sense and you went ahead and did it anyway. Well, number one, the likelihood that your son or daughter is going to go and be able to be successful, I'm not saying that it can't happen, but it's not really high. And then when they go away and they're successful, well, then they hide things from you. They don't tell you about what's going on. Now there's a lack of communication between you and them. And now there's hiding, and then there's anger, and then there's upset. And it can really disrupt the relationship a great deal, number one. And number two, the next thing that can happen is, in my experience, it really sets the college student behind. It sets them behind because they've now failed, and they have to live through that. and they have to go through that and think about, can I really be successful? So you want to really look and see, you know, what are they able to do? And to have that conversation. Don't wait for that conversation. Start now and talk about it. And talk about it. This is what I'd like to see, you know, for your junior year and your senior year. And I think we're ready to go then and be able to move forward. Okay. The other thing that you want to, you know, be doing is that helping your son or daughter, and for you guys as students, to start talking about what is it that's going on for me. This is the last point there. The student's ability to understand the diagnosis and what's going on. So one of the empowering things that can happen is for you to understand yourself. And so sometimes we talk about a diagnosis. I was talking to a family this afternoon, and their son has an autistic spectrum disorder. And we were talking about what that means. He's a third grader, okay, so he's a little guy. And one of the things that I did is I reached behind me on my shelf and pulled off a book that says, the title of the book is You Are Not a Label. And there's a lot of interesting conversation about whether we should talk about diagnosis or difference. The idea when you talk about a difference is that your differences can be really significant, but when you know your differences, we all have differences. We all have strengths, we all have challenges. And one of the best things you can do in preparation for going out and being your own advocate and being able to talk about what's going on is to understand yourself. So to understand what is it, and sometimes it will be a diagnosis. And it will be a diagnosis that you talk to people about. I have fill in the blank. I have attention deficit disorder. I have autistic spectrum disorder. I have something else. I have depression. I have anxiety. And now you connect with people as they understand what goes on. The second thing is you understand yourself. Hopefully you come to be comfortable with that. That doesn't define who I am, but it sort of says, you know, this is true for me, and now I need to go ahead and advocate for myself with regards to that. So to practice that in the high school setting and in talking about, how can I talk about this? What words should I use? Who should I tell? How should I say it to them with regards to that? Because the next step of what will happen when you go to college is now you are your own advocate. So you'll have the Office of Disability Services. So if you have had an IEP at high school and you get extended time or preferential seating, if you have a reading disability and tests are read to you, if you have other kinds of supports that you have access to, you're the one that goes to the Office of Disability Services, number one. You're the one that takes that piece of paper to your professor and say, I want you to know that I have extended time on my examinations. When is it that you would like to give that to me so I can make sure to get that extended time? And I need to take it in a separate location. If you don't do it on your own, nobody will do it for you. There won't be somebody from the Office of Disability Services going and doing it for you. But the really cool thing about it, it's empowering. You're taking control of your life and saying, this is what I need, and people have said this already tonight, this is what I need to be successful. There's no shame in it. This allows me to demonstrate to you and show you what I'm capable of. And so you go ahead and you advocate for yourself in that way. And to know that that's going to need to go on. So then when you're in the family situation before you go to college, can you talk about those kinds of things? Can you be comfortable with regards to what goes on? Okay. The next one goes into learning strategies and organization. One of the things that's really difficult when you go away to school is that you really have to be organized. You have to keep track of things. So I'm working with a young man named Michael, and he's a sophomore at a small college in the area in Wisconsin. And one of the things that happened for Michael is that there was a lot of work done in terms of how are you going to organize your life? Because high school is not like college. You know, usually what happens is your professors give you a syllabus, which is this list of all the things you have to do, and they hand that to you and say, now it's your job to be ready to turn in your papers, take your tests. I don't give you lots of warnings ahead of time. So one thing that Michael did is he got a nice planner and he put all those dates in his calendar for the entire semester. and planned ahead and things like that. So a plan for organization, and that's something that the student has to do, but then again, parents can be aware of what goes on with regards to that. The next thing is, what do you need to do when you start to have behavioral and emotional difficulties? It's been talked about tonight about accessing support when you're on campus, as well as some things that I'll talk about later with regards to how to get support when you come home and things like that.
Slide, empowering the student.
For those students where you're experiencing anxiety and stress, to manage that, and as was nicely talked about through sleep, through a regular kind of pattern of functioning, it can really be important. The kids that I work with that manage their stress and anxiety, they don't fall behind and then become overwhelmed, they're more likely to make it the entire semester, which usually is 16 weeks, without crashing and burning. One of the things that happens for some of the guys I work with is they fall behind, and then the thing they do is they stay in their room. So a young man I worked with, his name was Michael. He had an attention deficit disorder. He was not very organized. He didn't access the services that were available for him. And as 1 week turned to 4 weeks, turned to 6 weeks, he was already so far behind that he just stayed in his room. He didn't go to class. He didn't get anything done. And then the disruption that happened between him and his parents is that they discovered that he was struggling, and in 2 successive semesters he had to withdraw because he was overwhelmed with that. When we worked with Michael and things like that, what he did is that every week he made sure to manage his stress, stay up with things, and didn't hide in his room, and then he was able to be successful. So you really need to manage the stress and to fight the tendency to just hide and sort of avoid what the problems are and stay in your room and don't go through what's going on.
Slide, maintaining contact.
In terms of maintaining contact, this is really some suggestions that I would have in terms of parent-child contact, okay? I think it's really important to maintain the contact so you know what's going on. And I think establishing some conversation before your son or daughter goes away to school is good, so you know when are we going to talk and how are we going to talk about it, okay? So that you know, maybe you set up a time that you're going to call and talk. I would encourage that you actually have a conversation as opposed to just a text. And if you are texting to your son or daughter and they're not texting you back, you may want to drive, if possible, you may want to check in and go and visit them. Or set up times that you're actually going to be with them. Or Skype them or things like that. To have this ongoing contact is important in a couple different ways. Number one, that guy Michael who I just talked about, he didn't really have any accountability. And because he was avoiding his parents, and his parents was respecting his boundaries to have the desire to say, I'm in college, leave me alone, I can handle it, kind of thing, it got really bad really fast. So I really recommend that talk with your student, your son or daughter about when can I call? How can we talk? Tell me what's going on. So set up some times where your son or daughter comes home or you go and visit them. So you really have a sense of what's going on. And if things don't feel right, it's okay to say, I'm concerned. It just doesn't look right to me with regards to what's going on. Okay? This next one has already been talked about. Encourage your child to sign permission for you to obtain grade reports at the end of the semester. So I was working with a family, and their son said, you know, I'm in college now. You're not going to get that. I don't have to sign it. You're not going to get it. And the parents went along with it. Well, what happened with this young man, unfortunately, is that he failed the first semester. But because the parents did not get the grades, they didn't know that. And he was embarrassed and ashamed. And so the way that he handled that then is that he just went back to school. He didn't tell his mom and dad that he failed. They didn't know he failed because they didn't see the grades. He went back to school and pretended that he was in school for almost another entire semester. Okay. Obviously, that was a tragic situation. The lack of trust now generated between that student and their parents was significant. He was embarrassed and ashamed and things like that. So I'm very much an advocate for, getting those things, and especially when kiddos are struggling. College is really difficult to manage. My experience is that to not be surprised when the first semester in school, the grades don't turn out exactly as you would have liked them to turn out. That's not a bad thing. The question is what did you learn about it? What caused some of the difficulties? And how can we make it better the next semester? But when you have that transparency in their communication, there's a better chance that things can turn out better in the long run. Okay?
Slide. Mental health services.
In terms of mental health services, I would very much encourage you to maintain contact with your providers that you've been working with. However, there's a couple different things about that. So number one, if you're local and you can maintain contact by having sessions in the therapist's office and things like that, coming home on the weekends, things like that, that's a great thing to do. But one of the things that is getting increased attention is the whole idea of teletherapy. And what that is essentially is that you can have contact with your therapist by, staying in contact versus Skype or on the phone and things like that. The difficult thing that's happening right now is that there's a lot of laws in place that prohibit people from doing that across state lines. So for example, I worked with two young men in terms of preparation, and they were going to school at Miami of Ohio University. And so, quite honestly, historically, I had always maintained phone contact with the kiddos that I worked with. Well, I found out that the laws, the way that they're written, is such that if I'm going to be able to talk to somebody in Ohio, I have to be a licensed psychologist in the state of Ohio. And there's not a reciprocity law where Illinois has one with Ohio, and I can talk to Ohio folks, and Ohio therapists can talk to Illinois folks. You actually have to have licenses in both places with regards to what's going on. So one of the things that's been disappointing and frustrating for me as a provider is that other kiddos that I've had to keep contact with, it's getting in the way of doing that. Now there's people that are very invested in this kind of thing, so they may get licenses in other states, and there's a lot of attention that's being given to, is there a way to make this work better? Because we're in an age where this kind of teletherapy, conferencing kinds of things work. But just for you to know is that it may be that you have to go through some unique situations in order to do that, okay? Because that's the way those services are monitored right now. It leads to the need to establish a contact. You can sometimes, as was talked about earlier, you can get contact of a therapist on campus. I went to DePaul University for my graduate training. We had a mental health center there. Students could come and seek services there. That's true at NIU. That's true other places. The other thing that I recommend is sometimes you can talk to the college about, do they know somebody in the community with regards to that in terms of what goes on to get some things. I had thought that I added this, and I don't see it. I think it's on the previous one. No, I don't see it. But if you go, one of the ways that you can find a therapist in an area and find out about them, Psychology Today has a therapist finder, and if you Googled that, you would be able to find that. And then they give you a list of providers in the area. And so if your son or daughter is going to school in Akron, Ohio, you could pull that up. You can look at the credentials of the people, find out how to contact them, and to be able to facilitate that and make that happen that way, to be able to get the support of the mental health services with regards to that. Okay? So I will stop there, and then we're going to answer any questions that you might have.
Kelly Hartweg.
I feel the need to cheat a little bit. I know it's 8:25 right now, and people are going to start sneaking out. Please feel free to do that. I've had the chance to see all three of these speakers present in different forms before, and I want to add on to something that Jason and Dr. Fry talked about. Jason, this is from you, actually. You've talked in the past about setting up a regular time to talk to a student, whether that's once a week, every Wednesday and Sunday, whatever. But the add-on that you didn't mention tonight that I found very helpful in sharing with families was, if our time is 7 p.m. and I don't hear from you by 7:20, this is the step as your parent I'm going to take next. I'm going to contact your RA, I'm going to contact the police. That's extreme, but I thought that was a really helpful insight to share with families, that it's okay to set those boundaries around that concept of, I want you to be safe, I want to hear you, I want to FaceTime and see you, and I want to know you're okay. So just an add-on that I know I've heard from you in the past.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that it's important to have, we have these sliding expectations sometimes that we establish with each other. Well, it was just this once they missed the call, or it was just this one time that they weren't fully honest about what's going on at school. But instead of saying, well, maybe it was just this one time or that time, we really want to hold people to expectations, because when we do vary from those things, we can get lost a little bit in keeping track of what the goal is, or what the non-negotiables are. And if you start negotiating the non-negotiables, we're in trouble. This presentation tonight, what I really appreciate about it is that you all know that you might experience some things in college that are stressful. Everybody's going to experience stressful things in college. It would benefit every student who's graduating from this school and any other school in the district who's going to go to college to have heard this presentation tonight. And I know that's why you videotaped it, so you can replay it for folks. But every student could come across some sort of significant obstacle, and knowing what the resources are, and as parents, knowing what your limitations are, and what opportunities you have, I think is really, really key, because it is a team effort. To have success, we all have to work together.
So I'd like to open the floor to any general questions that parents or students may have for Brooke, Jason, or Dr. Fry.
Dr. Michael Frey, PhD.
Yeah, well, I just watched a webinar on all this, and I think it's the same thing for a medical doctor. It's going to be the question of licensure. And because different states, licenses in different states are unique. So it's not a federal license, it's a state license. So to the extent that the doctor wouldn't have a license in that state, they wouldn't. Now, that doesn't mean that you could prescribe medicine here in Illinois and take it with you to Wisconsin. But if there was going to be an evaluation that was going to be done, that say your medication isn't working out well, and now I'm going to have a session with you, evaluate what's going on, and say, I think you should up your Zoloft by 50 milligrams. My understanding of what I know is that that would not be able to be done. And so, again, and people are looking at this and sort of saying, we want to move to this because it's such a good way to deliver services, but now we have to get through some of these other ramifications. So, yeah.
Slide with photo and bio of Brooke Ruxton, PhD.
Really, a disability office is going to be responsible for the accommodations, and as some of the dogs are helping separate up in a way that's going to be most better for the students, but oftentimes they're not the office functioning themselves.
I'd just add to that that we, in our program, we moved to having a learning coordinator because we were inconsistently satisfied with the supports provided at colleges and universities.